show up on this wonderful day. I think there may have been some confusion around the date from what I hear, but let's deal with it. We're going to be talking about content marketing in general, but for small business. And the reason I tailored this to small business is because content marketing can be really overwhelming. So a little bit about me. I'm Josh Breese. I'm the Director of Strategy here at Anvil Media, which is upstairs. I'm sure you're familiar. I've been doing some form of marketing or digital marketing for about 20 years for small startup agencies like this. On the client side, I was with Charles Schwab for a number of years. And I've been doing some form of content marketing as well since I was with Schwab a number of years ago. So content marketing has been around for a long time. It's the buzzword. It's been out there now for the last few years as people are really paying more attention to content. And the channels that we have distributed are growing as well. So the subject is really large. I honestly could teach probably a 2 or 3 day class on this, and you guys would all be really bored if I tried to, you either couldn't get it because I tried cramming into an hour, or you'd have to spend 3 days with me, which would be fun. So what I tried to do today was really just sort of take a top line view and dive down into a particular area, which is around the content model. So that's what we're going to learn about today. And feel free to interrupt if you have questions, go along. I don't need to just run through a bunch of slides. And I promise you only maybe 3 slides have a lot of words on them. So one can have a medium amount of words. So what is content marketing? Right? Really general, we hear this term a lot and people throw it around a lot. It's like any of the other number of terms that have been thrown out over the years since digital has come around. And it's about content, it's about your customer, it's about setting up all this strategy and everything, but it can be really confusing. So we broke it down to really what it is. It's the use of relevant and valuable content to drive desired actions from your target audience. There's 3 key things in this. One is relevant and valuable. At the end of the day, you may think your content is fantastic, but if your customers or potential customers, your potential customers don't find it relevant to their situation, whatever part of the buying cycle or research cycle they're in, if they don't find it valuable, they're not going to engage with it. And that's what you want them to do. I took out leads and sales because a lot of people think that, content marketing is about driving leads and sales. At the end of the day, sort of that's what we want, but content marketing is broader than that. What we want is a specific action, and that action may be just to engage, may just be to read it and have a perception of you. It may be something that we do want to lead or we do want to make a sale at the end of the day. It depends on where they are in the cycle. So in real simple forms, it's getting these guys here to read your content and engage and do something over here. Become even aware of who you are. That can be a successful piece of content marketing, is just awareness. So engage, generate a lead, develop loyalty, subscribe, visit the store, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, you need to determine what the actions are that you want them to do and how the content that you're going to be putting out there is going to drive them to that action. So when you break it down like that, it sounds pretty simple, but then you start researching it and you get something like this, right? It's a lot of little things in a lot of different ways. It's all these different platforms, it's CMS and CRMs and digital asset management and content producers and all those things. And this is what scares small businesses away from thinking they can do content marketing. These are the kinds of things and charts and graphs and research that you go out there and you see, and big, large enterprise businesses actually can do things like this and put all this together. They have teams of people, which you probably don't have sitting there. They have large budgets, those kinds of things. So this becomes really overwhelming to people. And the other thing that people think when they see something like that is this is going to cost me a lot of money. Content marketing really doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. You can invest very little, you can invest a lot. It's how you put it together and the structure by which it's formed that actually makes it successful, not how much money you can throw at it. So a small business can do content marketing and still be successful just as well. And actually sometimes it's easier because you don't have all of those things to worry about. So what I did is I broke it down and we're going to make it into 4 semi-simple steps because it does take some work. It's not just about writing a white paper and putting it out there. There is more that goes into it. But if you break it into 4 categories, identify, and you have the number of things you need to identify. create that content and amplify it and then refine it, right? We're going to go into a little bit more around the identification than anything else. And certainly if you have questions about the other areas, we can talk about that, and I'm more than happy to. I'll probably get through this presentation fairly quickly because I find that people mostly have questions. When we talk about identify, what that is really is setting the foundation for what you're doing. You need to understand what your goals are, who your audience are, what channels, the technology that you need to use. This is where it can become really overwhelming. As you get into creation, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? You need to understand, and this is, I think, a really key point that a lot of people miss, is you're telling a story, and you're telling a story across multiple channels over a long period of time, and sometimes somebody gets part of that story at day 1, and then day 15, they may get another part of that story. You need to account for those kinds of things. Amplify is really the advertising that goes behind it. How do you distribute it? How do you pay for distribution? What are the channels and the technology and the programs that you use to push this out? And then refine is really test and measure it. If you don't know at the very beginning when you're setting up the metrics, you don't know what you're trying to achieve, you don't have those metrics, really defined metrics, you can't really test and then measure to see what is successful. So, like I said, we're going to go into the content model. And what I did is I took actually an old client of ours, and I extracted, because it's what we call the swing here, where we use work for other things, right? Getting the nod of approval from Kent over there. I took an old client, and this one is somewhere in between that super complicated one and a completely simple one. But I want you to see how it plays out as you start to develop a model and how the dependencies come about. So this is one of the slides with a lot of words on it. So how to create a model. It's really foundational, and this is, if you don't do this correctly, a lot of the other things you're going to do won't be as successful or won't be successful at all. You do this so you can understand the existing efforts that you have already, because if you have a website, if you have a social property, or social properties, if you have an email list, you're already doing some form of content marketing as it stands. You want to put structure to it. So this model helps you understand what are you already doing. It also helps you understand the deficiencies and the opportunities that are there for you, as well as you can make informed decisions going forward. So even though you create this model, you put a plan in place, you execute it, it can help you make decisions about when you're doing that and going forward. You always want to go back to this model. And then prioritization. This goes back to the money and the time and the resources and all of those kinds of things. You may come up with this great plan, but at the end of the day, you may not have the time or the resources or the dollars to do that. So this allows you to prioritize the decisions that you make and prioritize the actions that you take. So the key to this model is aligning the flow of the consumer life cycle. How does the consumer or your potential consumer, whether you're B2B or B2C, how are they interacting with your brand? And it aligns your content and your content generation and distribution to that. And that all we're trying to do, very simply, is get the right content to them at the right time. If they are ready to make a decision about a purchase, you don't want to be telling them who you are at the very, they should already know who you are. So we'll talk a little bit about marketing funnel and how it aligns with that. So it's pretty simple, right, the way to do this. Define the goals, the target audiences, the life cycle, the content, the delivery, and then align all those things together. So this is an insurance company that I'm going to be talking about. Essentially, it's an insurance company. They actually provide software to insurance companies. So some of the things that are filled into the flow charts are not going to be relevant to you, but it's the structure that actually matters. So if we take that last model and we put it visually, this is how simple it actually is. You set your goals, target audience, and the value proposition. We'll talk a little bit about that. The funnel position, that leads to the content, what we call content focus, content type, and distribution channel. This is your map, right? This is how you are going to execute. You're going to start filling these things in, and once you have it done, you lay it out and say, I know exactly what I need to do. So let's start with the goals, right? So it's hard to make decisions without goals. And one of the things that people say, well, these are the goals of what I'm doing from a content marketing standpoint. Those are good to have, But what we do want to have is we want to understand what your business goals are. Because content marketing is only one aspect of your overarching marketing effort or your advertising effort. This is a piece of it. So you want to make sure that you're trying to use this process and this to achieve what your business goals are. When you're making decisions about should I do this, should I do that, going back to these goals, how does what the decision I'm about to make support these goals? How does it support these? And should I? It gives you that sort of check and balance. And then, you know, like I was saying, action statements that relate to content marketing, they must support them. They have to do that. So here, this one is their goals where they wanted to clearly articulate the brand because they were having some issues with that. They wanted to gain efficiency, and that is something you can do as well with this. If you're sending out emails to all these people and you're doing, you know, some social marketing as well, and you're doing all the things, you're not really seeing how effective you are, and you probably are wasting effort. So one of the things they wanted to do with this program was gain some efficiency in how they were producing and distributing content. Providing consistent messaging, generate leads, and then they want to convert customers. So these are what the goals. I would say don't come up with a list of 10 goals that you want to do. Because you'll get spread too thin, a lot of them will overlap. Keep it between 3 and 5. I really recommend no more than 5. So let me talk a little bit about target audience. So we have our goals, now who are we actually targeting? You may have personas, you may know exactly, you know, who it is, you're looking at demographics, you're looking at, you know, some of their attributes, what their behavior. Then we want to break it down into maybe segments. So you may say, I want to target healthcare professionals. That's a pretty broad category, right? So there's CEOs, there's C-suite people, there's maybe marketing managers within that, there's HR that you may be targeting. You want to break people down and your audiences down into segments that have similar content needs. Because that's really the thing. Does this person engage or need or want or find this type of content valuable as this person over here? So they may be different titles, they may be different industries, but if they are reacting to the content in the same way, then they become a segment. So, you know, for this, it was community built, you know, surfers, none of these are going to make any sense because these are all very custom to them, but what you want to do is lay your own target audience in there and your segments in there and give them attributes. Why do they want this? Are they older and less likely to be using Snapchat? I don't use Snapchat because I'm older. So marketing to me using Snapchat content probably is not going to work as well as it is for some of these younger people over here. Younger people wave! So once you have this defined, you now have your goals and you know who you're targeting. This is the value proposition. This is really important because it gives you an indication of how you're writing and what is going to go in this content. As you break down the segments, the value proposition that is going to convert them or have them take that action is what you want to stress. For a CEO, it may be, or a CFO, it may be costs that are really important. For an HR manager, it may be something that's more around efficiency. So if your product or service has different benefits or value propositions to your target audience, you want to break that down and make sure that you're aligning with those segments. What is the value? What is the most important 1 or 2 value propositions that they're actually going to respond to, or you think that they will? And you can do that through anecdotal, you can do that through research, you can do that through sending out surveys, just knowing your customers and that thing, and what is important to them. Why are you different? Why would they make that choice? So now we want to make sure that we start aligning all of this properly, and we look at it. Now we have our goals up here, then we go into our segments, and now we've aligned our value propositions with them, right? So you're making this nice flow chart. You can do this in a spreadsheet around aligning all of these things. So when you go to create new content, all you have to do is reference this. You don't have to think, well, what is going to be important to them, right? So you can see how we did that with here. When we write a piece of content about, you know, to the community builder, they're really, that whole persona around the community builder, that segment is around, they want deep relationships with their provider. They want to increase the retention of those. That's really important to them, as well as increase the efficiency and productivity in there. So very different than the cloud-free skyline, which is down there, which is mere agency needs. It's a whole different set of content that we end up producing. Any questions so far? No? So the funnel. So the one on the left, or the right there, no, my left and right. The one on the right there is a very custom funnel. If you don't have that, if you don't know that, you can use a very basic. If you just go search marketing funnel, there's probably 10,000 different marketing funnels on the web. If you don't have one where you know what your customers are doing, you can just use a very basic one with awareness, research, consideration, purchase, then they become a customer. There's a whole other part of this funnel. There's once they're a customer, retention, and all those kinds of things. But this is very basic stuff. Basically, who's aware? Are they aware of you? Are they researching your product or service? Are they considering you? And is purchase. Those are very different messages that you're sending out from a content perspective, and understanding where they are and in that funnel is important, because you're not, like I said before, you're not going to be buy now if they don't even know who you are, if they're still in the awareness stage. So understanding how your customers, or how your potential customers, what their life cycle is, what their flow is, how quickly do they move through the funnel. Is it something where you have a purchase cycle of 30 days or 2 days, right? I go to Amazon all the time. If I'm going on Amazon, I'm likely to buy something because I've already gone through a lot of the top tier things. I've already done all the research, I've already done all that, I'm ready to make a decision and go. So I don't want other content that's not relevant to my spot in here. Content focus. This is a little bit amorphous. Some people have not a hard time grasping it, but they're just like, how do I do this? When you have a lot of content, it's around how do you take what this content is really the focus, or what's the subject of this content. If you're looking to, have somebody understand what you stand for, your brand, that content should be focused on that. It shouldn't have a call to action right there about buy now, right? So we look at these things and say, is this content support content? Is it benefit content? Is it intended to generate a lead, value proposition? This is just a label, right? So it gives you an understanding that as you go through this flow, you have your goals, your customers, you have the value proposition. This is a content category. This is something that when you write content, this is the subject that you want to write about. Okay, so this aligns as well with, should align with your funnel as well. Where does my brand content go? Do I need to reinforce the brand? Do I need to make them familiar with the brand? So we're aligning all the funnel position needs of the target audience with this content subject. So again, this goes into your spreadsheet or your flow chart, and see how it all sort of maps out. And you're putting this in alignment. You got your funnel position, and you're aligning this with the focus or the subject. Okay. So content type is a little bit different. This is for somebody, or this is something that you want to do if you have a lot of different types. This isn't around subject matter or format, like video or print or anything like this. This is around what is the type of content. Now you may, as a small business, not need to have all this. I just want to sell some things, and that's always going to be a certain type of content. But when you get into larger content repositories, you have to look at things. Is this a piece that's doing advertising? Is this a piece that's intended for PR? Because the way you write, the way you create for those kinds of things is very different. So if you don't have a huge content repository, if you're not planning on making a huge one, you don't necessarily need this content type in here, but it's always good. It's another label, it's another way to categorize. So if you do have to search for content, you want to find it, you label it something like this is purely sales content, and you're able to pull out everything that's marked sales. So it starts to get a little bit bigger. We're starting to go from the exposure, we go from funnel position to content focus to the content type. Okay. The last piece on this is distribution channel. Obviously this is important, right? How is the content getting into the hands of the people that you want to get into and where? So you start looking at distribution channels based based upon where they may be in the funnel position. Where do people typically do the research? What's the first thing you guys, what does everybody pick up? Go to a phone, they go to Google, right? So if it's a research piece and we're looking at that, we probably want something out there. We want to focus on SEO efforts. We want to get it onto the web. Whereas print, if it's you're going to a trade show or something like that, you want to have some print content. So this is really around the content that we created, the subject that it deals with, the person it's intended to go to, where am I actually going to distribute this? White paper, or excuse me, print, probably not going to go out through email, right? So you can look, and you want to look and say, well, yeah, I can send a white paper out through most of these channels, but is that where your consumer is going to want to consume them? So this is, the whole idea behind this is just to line all of these things up so you understand where to create and where to put it out. Now we move this further down, and what it ends up looking like is something like this. Right? Now this one actually spanned, when I got finished with it, spans probably about 15 pages of this kind of thing, right? But it was a pretty robust content execution. You could do this as simply as, hey, I just want to do this through email and web, or I just want to do this through social and web, where your whole content plan could actually look just about this big. And it's not that difficult to execute. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at it, you have goals and who you're targeting, and then all of this starts to flow. This way you have a map, you have a guide that you can actually produce and distribute content at this point. So what do you do after that, right? There's a lot to do after that. This was the plan. Now you need to figure out what your content needs are, right? So you take this map, you take this plan, and you say, well, what content do I already have? If you have a website, you already have content, right? Maybe you need more. Maybe you need some landing pages. Maybe you don't have any. Maybe you have a bunch of email addresses, but you don't have an email program ready to go, so you don't have content for that. You may decide that infographics are something that you want to use because that's what you're finding out people are responding to. So this allows you, what you do is I would go and create another sheet or some other form of database or whatever way you organize and determine what are my content needs. Based upon this, what I just laid out, where am I missing? What are the holes and what content am I missing? So you need to determine what those content needs are. And resources. I'm sure everybody doesn't have a team of writers, and we have a team, a bunch of team of videographers and ready to go. What are the resources that we need to have to create content? And this is where small businesses run into it. We see it all the time, where small businesses really, they don't have the resources to create content. And at the end of the thing, in one of the slides, at the end of this, we'll talk about how it's the core of everything that we do. So, should you look for outside help? Make sure you put yourself on a realistic schedule to say, yeah, I'm going to write 3 blog posts in a week, and you don't have the staff to do it, or you don't have the time to do it, you're not going to get it done. So understand what your needs are, and then marry your resources to that and figure out how do you cost effectively get that done or scale back what you may do. There's no harm in doing this slowly over time. The more content that you can produce, the better. But if you don't have the resources and from a monetary or a person standpoint, it's no good trying to produce bad content, and it's no good going bankrupt trying to produce it when you don't know how it's going to work. So start slowly. Start with an email program, and a web program, or a social program. Technology. Now this is the big one that a lot of people get really scared about because you see things like CRMs and you see email platforms, so you have Marketo, and you have all these kinds of different things. You can do this stuff very low cost. You don't need to buy the enterprise level. You don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles. You can do email marketing with MailChimp if you really wanted to, and it's lower cost, or something like Acton versus Marketo. So technology, you don't necessarily need a big CRM system to make sure you're managing every contact that comes in. So the idea is to understand, how can I do this cost effectively? Understand there are a lot of low cost technology solutions out there. It just takes a little bit of research. Or you can hire an agency to do that research for you, and they can make recommendations. So there's a lot of ways to do this. But it is a very important part, because if you don't have some way to measure this, which is part of the technology stack, if you don't have some way to measure it, you don't have some way to distribute it, you pretty much wrote a lot of content for no reason. Content calendar. it really is best to create a content calendar, know what you're going to be doing, plan it out, try and get ahead of it. You don't necessarily need to produce a lot, but even if you're only producing 1 or 2 things, plan it out. Plan it out for seasonality, plan it out to your customers' needs, whatever it may be, but get it down and know what you're doing, not just on the fly. And then metrics, can't stress this enough. We are a measurable marketing agency, so if I don't mention metrics, I get, something happens to me bad. But it is important to understand. When you go back to the goals about, if you're just trying to gain awareness about your brand, put some metrics in place to measure that. It could be website visits, could be organic traffic, could be terms that are used from a branding standpoint. Everything, for the most part, is measurable, and if you need to have those in there, because at the end of the day, when you turn around and say, well, I just spent $50,000 over the course of this year doing content marketing, I don't know what I really got out of it. There are ways to measure it. So it's really important, and it also helps you set up tests, right? At the end of the day, say this piece of content, I have these 2 pieces of content, I'm gonna send them out to the similar people, and let's see which one reacts. You get a lot of engagement, a lot of shares on one, you don't on the other, don't put the other one out there. Let's refine the better one and get that out to more people. So if you don't set up those metrics and that testing and learning, then a lot of this effort will look to be wasted. Finally, you want to amplify. This is what we call the magic triangle at Anvil, and I brought this in because really, you've done all this work around resources, content creation, everything, now you need to put it out there. And what we have found to be most effective is using a combination of organic, paid, and social. And if you look at this, our magic triangle, the very center of this is content, and that's what really this is about. Whether it's Google, whether it's paid, whether it's social media, everybody's trying to consume some form of content. Doesn't matter if it's a video or a written word, whatever it may be, infographics. And there's a dependency, and not a dependency, but these 3 things work really well together, better than they work independently. I have a little speech that I typically give for this. I'll give you the shortened version. Really, your organic is informing. Organic is telling you what are people searching for at the end of the day. What keywords are they looking for? What phrases are they looking for? That supplies, it helps you understand what content to write for paid media as well as for social. And in return, social gives you back domain authority and search authority. So Google looks at, and I only use Google, I know there's 1 or 2 other search engines out there, but we really just talk about Google a lot. Social will give you good links back to your website, which Google looks at and says that it's coming from Pinterest or it's coming from Facebook. It has a high domain authority and it helps boost your organic rankings. And when you find something that is working really well on social, a piece of content, amplify it with paid media, whether it's paid social or AdWords or anything like that, and use content syndication. If you wrote a white paper about your business, you wrote an opinion piece, whatever it may be, content syndication is actually a great way to do. Channels like LinkedIn on the B2B side, or things like Taboola, which are not super low cost but not super expensive as well. They can get your content into people's, in front of people very easily. So that's really around the amplification, and what you get from that is you get much better brand awareness. The more your content's out there, the more people are aware of you, deeper engagement, increased conversions, whatever that may mean to you, and then ultimately a higher brand loyalty. Right? And this was the other one with a lot of words on it. So some helpful points, some of the things I've already talked about. Start with the company goals, not just the ones of the content marketing program. Stay between 3 and 5 goals. Make sure you can measure. Segment your audience. Let's see if there's anything I didn't cover in here. Determine channels. That's one thing. Determine channels the target is most likely to use. I use, let's just say for me, just from a social perspective, or from all perspectives, I use the web, obviously, I use Google, I use Facebook, and I use Instagram. That's who I'm most likely to use. But if you ask anybody, they probably have 2 or 3 different channels that they probably prefer or use based upon their age or their friends or whatever they're doing. So really look at what channels they're most likely to use, and you do that through analytics. You can look at analytics and determine what is sort of the path and the flow that these people are taking. Where am I seeing the most engagement? Is that the right customer for me? So when you're creating this content plan, map it to what they're most likely to use, not all of them that they're going to use. make sure you create an experience that works cross-channel. If I see, you know, brand X says, you know, this thing $10 off over here, and then I see it $20 off over here, it's not really consistent. I'm certainly gonna go for the $20 off. Make sure that your story is being told consistently across these channels. Know that people are looking on their phone, they're looking on their laptops, they're looking in social channels, they're doing all of those things before they're typically purchasing or before they're engaging with you in the way that you want. So make sure that your experience is consistent from a brand perspective, from a messaging perspective. Make sure that they're not getting confused. And we see that a lot with some of our clients. They come to us and they'll have everything from different logos to completely different messaging, different tones. You've got to make sure that experience works cross-channel. Use analytics, can't stress that enough. When you do this model, creating a user journey is actually pretty useful. You can get really, really deep into these. They pay people to spend extensive amounts of time creating user journeys. You can do simple ones as well. Just understand what is the journey somebody takes from knowing who you are to converting, and map that out, and then tailor your content plan to that. I already said this, but start small and grow. If you try and do it all at once, you'll be doing this for 6 to 8 months, and you'll look and say, what have I actually done? Start with just 1 or 2 small programs. Say, you know what, I just want to get this white paper out. I just want to deal with this product. I just want to deal with these 2 channels. Try it small, see how it works, learn about it, and then continue to grow it. And then don't forget about offline content. If you have a business where there are trade shows, where you're out in the community and anything, don't forget that's still content. You're still producing content. You're still find a way to generate to understand who saw it. So billboards, right? Billboards, they price them based upon how many people they estimate pass every day. But if you put a specific URL on a billboard with a call to action, you know how many people actually saw it and reacted to that, right? So don't forget about offline content and marrying that to online as well. And then you can certainly ask Anvil for help. A little plug for Anvil.